Did you actually answer my question, or did you just acknowledge my question? Did I miss the answer, or did I simply get no answer from you?
I gave you a trick answer. I gave you the answer without giving you the answer. I ultimately gave you a trick. And that was the real answer.
But it answered nothing. It only answered some questions that nobody ever asked. Nobody ever wanted those answers. Those answers answered nothing. No questions were there.
My answer applies to all questions. It answers questions, which is why it applies. It answers all of them.
One answer cannot answer all questions. Questions are all different, and the answers are different. One answer is different to another answer. So there is more than one answer to these questions. There is one for each.
Apply the answer to your question. The answer does work with it. It does answer your question. It does not answer your question until it's applied. But applying it is a logical step to take.
All your answer does is rephrase my question. It is a very limited way of answering any question, let alone my own. How can you answer any question by rephrasing it? Are all answers that self-evident?
Your question led to a simplified version of itself. Your question did not ask for simplification, but it got those who asked it to simplify it anyway, because it took our minds to simplify it. It took our minds to produce it.
Simplified or not, it is still complicated. Its simplification is more complicated. Simplifying anything is complicated. I cannot simplify.
You can simplify anything by removing something from it. The more you remove, the simpler it will be. So simplify your question by removing your question. Leave the curiosity that produced your question.
My curiosity produces questions because I am curious about their answers. Before my questions are posed, I get ideas which lead me to posing questions. So it is inevitable that I will pose them.
Do it backwards, and then you will do it. When you are not doing it backwards. When you do this backwards, which is that backwards, you will do it.
I will need to pose an empty question, a question I do not seek an answer for. I will need to pose a question for its own sake, so that there will be one.
That question will make you curious. You will not know the answer to that question, and you will be curious about it. You will seek its answer, because you will be curious about it.
But what if I am not curious about such an empty question? I know there is nothing to it because it is such an empty question. How could I ever be curious about such an empty question? There is nothing to that question.
All questions are like that, asking for answers which they do not, themselves, have, lacking in a particular way, and asking for what they lack.
So questions do not deserve their answers. Questions must remain unanswered. Seeing as they receive no answer, they receive what they deserve?
You think that questions deserve answers, but they can only ask for their answers. They may or may not receive those answers. They receive what they deserve.
But questions do deserve answers. There is nothing that is more appropriate to give them. Questions deserve nothing less than those answers. They literally call for those answers.
When was an answer to a question ever accepted? When no answer was? When nothing was allowed to answer it? When that question was not allowed? And was a fact?
When answers gave us facts. When our answers were correct. When our questions were correct as well, giving us correct answers. When our answerers were correct.
Correct until the doubt seeped in, and still correct throughout that era of doubt, but still entirely worthy of it. Considered correct, but considered entirely worthy of it.
The doubt never carried information. The doubt attacked information. The doubt should have carried better information, so it would attack with better information, rather than attack with no information, and fail the attack. It should have succeeded.
The doubt called for better information. The current information was doubted, and we needed better information. Our doubt called for better information. We doubted that information very much.
Experts tore down their own work. Experts had the right to tear down their own work, and only experts could tear down the work of experts. They were lucky that they had the right.
They were never convinced. They knew enough to know they knew nothing. They were not convinced by anything they knew. They knew everything.
They probably doubted their own answers. They probably were not answers, and they probably knew it. They at least suspected it.
Questions do seem connected to answers. They do call for answers, which seems to signify some connection, since answers do go where they are called for. Answers and questions do seem connected.
Questions are not asked for their own sake. Questions are asked so they can lead logical ponderers to questions' answers. Questions exist to lead answerers. Questions have this purpose outside of simply being questions.
A question is a starting point. You start talking when you start asking. Your questions are starting points. But you can say something different. You would not start at a question. It wouldn't matter what you said.
There are other ways to begin hunting answers, but questioning things is the most direct way, and the most structured way.
Questions fail to lead us, but answers do lead us. So where do answers come from? They actually come from the truth. They do not come from questions.
We match our answers to our questions, because these have connections. We actively trace them. We match them up. They do connect.
They only connect from our perspective. Only we can see a connection between them. There is no connection between them, unless you see it from our perspective.
But we connect questions to answers, so we prove they connect. Otherwise, we would not be able to connect them in the first place. But their connection is proven. We prove it to ourselves.